This week we talk about Linux gaming, some Nvidia news that'll help you play those games, an alternative to the Snap Firefox package, and an ethical hacking distro.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 136, recorded Saturday, January 27th. That's when it went sideways.
This show is brought to you by members like you. Thanks.
Welcome to the Untitled Linux Show. This week, we're going to be doing things a little bit different because Jonathan is not feeling so well. So I'm going to do my best to lead it up. And with me, I have a couple of the other usual guys, Ken and Jeff Massie. So first thing, how are you guys doing this week?
Doing good.
Doing awesome.
Good.
Glad to be here. Missing Jonathan.
Yeah, we had a time trying to prepare the backup plan before the show, and well, Jonathan has decided he was well enough to help us run the controls, so we are very thankful for that, because our backup plan was not working out so well. But enough about that. We'll get started on the news for the week, and we got some really good stuff. The first one is kind of a big one that I'm excited about, at least if you like Linux gaming. And with that story, Valve, Proton, and Wine, they continue to push forward Windows gaming on Linux. And in my experience over the past couple of years, most games I want to play, they just work, and often just work better than Windows. So what could be better? For starters, Proton 8.0-5 has been released, and the big feature Jonathan has been waiting for, so it's unfortunate he can't talk about this, is HDR support. I know he's already played with it in Nobara, but HDR will be available now if you have supported hardware like the Steam Deck OLED, and also if you're playing a list of games that support it, and it's a pretty good list, including several Resident Evil games, Devil May Cry, and I don't know, must have been at least 20 more, 15 more. Also, with the new release, add support for more games and improvements for the games that are already supported. The next cool feature coming to Steam Beta is the addition of VA-API DRM video acceleration for remote play. So VA API encoding for remote play has been around for a few years in Steam, but this edition adds DRM, and that's Direct Rendering Manager for remote play. So while the previous benefited X11 users, the update should improve remote play on Wayland. So moving towards the future there. I always like to push Wayland on the show, at least lately. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is, or the final thing I wanted to touch on on this is, it's just a proposal. And that proposal is to add the Windows NT Sync driver to the Linux kernel. So this would improve gaming significantly. Tests that were ran on a number of games, and the lowest improvement was 21%, and that was with Metro 2033, while Dirt 3 had a whopping 678% improvement. So, there's no guarantee that this proposal will be approved and make it into the mainline Linux kernel. But you can be sure that like Steam Deck and gaming distros like Nobara, they're likely to pick this up and add this into their kernel. So even if it's not on the main line, you'll be able to get your hands on it one way or another. So what do you guys think of that?
I was pretty impressed, especially, like the NT Sync driver. I mean, there was one in there, okay, almost 700% improvement, but there was a lot of like 100, 125% improvements. And, for the people that don't know, it has to do with how Windows emulating how Windows synchronizes events in the kernel. And this is just kind of a different way to do it and seems to be more efficient. So barring any real big downsides, it seems like this is a win-win situation here.
Yes, I would agree with that. We've got to remember, this is just a request for comment that's been submitted, actually. And she just basically put in the author of it, trying to remember her name, Zadora?
I don't remember. I really should pay more attention to that. But
well, Elizabeth Figura,
or
the author.
She says in her YouTube video that's attached to the Mike Larabell's article, Zeb Figura.
Well, either way, it's likely to improve some things. But one reason I could see maybe it not hitting the mainline kernel is it's maybe rather specific, as in to Windows things, and I guess I'm not sure. I haven't paid that close attention how much they care about getting Windows things working in the Linux kernel, but
well, it's for wine, so I could see it. The one question I had for you.
Well, the reason I could see it not making it is because it's basically similar to the request for a comment that OpenZS had put in a while back, where it's basically giving you a framework. They may come back and say you need to break each of the patches out and give reasons for them without having to refer to the other patches. Though I hope they help her with walking through doing that. This is the first time, from what I understood in the video, that she's even put in a patch to the kernel.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Very possible. What I was curious though is, do either of you use Remote Play? I mean, I've dabbled in it, but I've never actually really done that much with it.
I've tried to use it, dabbled with it. It just never worked well for me. I've also dabbled with it as a potential higher speed remote desktop solution. I don't remember what for, but I read that as a solution to some problem I had at one point, but I just never got good speeds out of it. I don't know why. If it's my network, my computer, or something else, because I've heard plenty of people say that it worked great for them.
Yeah, I mean, it worked fine for me. I just normally game at my computer with my monitor versus, and hooking it up to the TV and playing on my laptop connected to the TV and using the Remote Play that way. I don't know, it just didn't
closest
wasn't as comfortable.
The Remote Play, it was using it was a PS3 media server that you could set up under Linux on your computer and stream your videos to a PS3. And I don't.
Yeah, I was using it for actual Steam games.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I was for gaming. But so let's move on our next story on the list. That's you, Jeff. You want to talk about the Nvidia beta driver?
Yeah. Well, I figured to tie in with your gaming news here. I thought I'd call out that there's a new Nvidia driver, 550.40.07 beta. So keep in mind that if you decide to jump to this driver, there could be some rough edges, and this is a beta, so you have been forewarned. There's several bug fixes in this driver, and it has new goodies in it as well. So, for example, in this driver, there's now support for R8 and GR88 and YCBCR and GBM formats, so different video formats. They fixed a bug that prevented VRR, variable refresh rate, from working with Wayland. And I haven't had a chance to test this, but I remember Jonathan brought this up a couple weeks ago. So it looks like it was an issue, and it has been or is being addressed. They added lib Nvidia GPU comp.so to the driver package. So this is a helper library used for GPU shader compilation. So should speed that up a little bit. They finally, and this is one I waited for, they finally updated the installer to allow installing the driver when an existing driver is already loaded. So, you know, it's not so bad for me now coming off of repositories, but in the past, having to purge everything, shut everything down, then install it, it was just kind of a headache. So that now has been fixed. The new driver has optimized the X driver headless frame rate limiter to more closely mimic upstream behavior and prevent it from activating in inconvenient situations. They've added a new Xconfig option, limit frame rate when headless, you know, basically to disable the headless frame rate limiter. There's now an experimental support for HDMI 10-bit per component, and support for the prime render offload to the Vulkan Wayland WSI. WSI is windowing system integration. And what that means is, the short version is that there's going to be there are many windowing formats. You got X11, Wayland, direct to display, MIR, and so on. And it's desirable to have the windowing system handle the render instead of the GPU code trying to keep up with changes in the windowing system interfaces. So basically, the GPU does a lot of work and says, here, display this, and then the windowing system can say, oh, here's what I need to do. It's kind of moving the API more into the actual display driver, or the windowing system, so the display driver doesn't have to keep track of all these little API changes. There's also several new Vulkan extensions which have been added. I won't list them because they're really long and probably boring to read, but if you really want to know, you know, if you're listening or watching this, look at the link in the show notes, and you can see in there which specific ones have been added. We also have VDPAU support for running in X Wayland, and VDPAU is the video decode and presentation API for Unix. So basically better video playback in X Wayland. This is a pretty big driver release. There's a lot of changes, bug fixes, a lot of support for Wayland has been added. And I just went over just a few of the highlights. There's a link in the show notes that talks more about it. And there's a link to the actual changelog in there, which will go over every little thing they did. But, you know, give it a try and let us know what you think, you know. But again, this is beta, so don't load this on a machine that, you know, you can't have some irregular behavior or maybe a crash or something, you know. It could be rock solid for you, but, you know, as they say, your mileage will vary. So let us know what you find on Discord.
I'll stick to my AMD for now, but if they keep working on things for Linux, maybe I'll give them another shot sometime in the future.
And share it with Nuvo.
Yeah, that's also, there's open source previously that they've done that they're actually able to look at and put into the open source driver. And, you know, it's not like they completely open sourced everything, but there's a lot of the firmware stuff they did. And so they kind of gave the open source driver a little help. It just takes a while for it to filter into actual usable driver code. But yeah, there's a lot of Wayland stuff in there. And there's a huge page with small font that they've updated and changed. And I kind of just cherry picked a lot of the stuff and things that I kind of knew what they were, because there were some stuff I'm like, I don't know what that is.
That's how I am with most of your hardware stories, Jeff. But so I wonder how that, if the new Nvidia stuff, if there's any way that could affect ethical hacking.
Well, that's a good question. But I don't know the answer to that, but I do know about a great distribution that you may want to look at. According to Marius Nestor and Bobby Borisov, that's going to be Parrot OS 6.0 that has just been released. Now, this is the latest version of this Debian-based security-oriented distribution designed for security experts, penetration testers, and those interested in cybersecurity. It's shipped with the newer Linux 6.5 kernel series for better hardware support. Parrot OS 6.0 also ships with an improved installation experience thanks to the Calamares installer, an updated system appearance for a fresh look to its Mate desktop environment, Pipewire replacing Pulse Audio for improved audio support, and Grub fail-safe boot options for more reliable and safe booting. It gives you access to the latest hacking methods and techniques through its updated penetration testing tools and an experimental containerization feature which was introduced for unsupported tools to improve flexibility. Parrot OS 6.0 also includes a new libc6 library and Python 3.11 to enable various tools to be upgraded to their latest upstream version. Parrot OS 6.0 is available in multiple flavors, including Security Edition, Home Edition, and Hack the Box Edition. Marius also promises to review the Raspberry Pi edition of Parrot OS 6.0 on the Raspberry Pi once it is available for that. Either one of y'all think you'll take this one for a drive?
Well, I have been interested in Parrot OS for quite some time. I've never used it. For those who don't know, Parrot OS, at least the security one, and maybe Hack the Box, I'm not sure. They're similar in what they do. They're similar to like Kali Linux, but I've heard a lot of people say they like Parrot better. So I mean, people know of Kali. I think Kali's more popular just because of
its age.
Its age. I hear a lot of people ribbing Kali users because I think it's one of those hacking movies that maybe kind of introduced Kali, utilized it, get ribbed a lot. And also, I mean, even like when I had a class, basically one of my classes was essentially a CompTIA Security Plus class in college, and even in that class, they touched on Kali. But I keep hearing good things. I've heard about it for quite some time. I don't do a whole lot of like ethical hacking stuff. It sounds fun, but it is something I've been interested in. So it's definitely, if you like Kali, it might be something to check out. And if you like it for your pen testing or whatever else, they do have the Home Edition if you just want to use that for general purpose too. These are all the things people tell me about it. And I don't know. How about you, Jeff?
No, I probably won't try it. You kind of said it last story. I'm the hardware guy. I really don't do much hacking or anything like that, and so I wouldn't have any tools for me to use because I just don't use them.
Is that because you're a Ubuntu professional?
I wouldn't even call it professional. I can swim in it a little bit, but I'm not doing laps around the pool. If I fall in, I can make my way out.
For those who aren't
Google,
for those who are not Ubuntu professionals, there has been some more complaining going on in that area, and nothing new with Ubuntu users, but we've talked about the Ubuntu Pro banner, where if you're on the terminal and you do if you use apt at all, it give you the banner saying, "Hey, you should get Ubuntu Pro," blah 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 blah, and how that we talked about how that banner drove people crazy a year ago, sometime last year, I think they came up with that. And they were calling it. A lot of people are saying there's advertisement in my terminal. And I think maybe we kind of said on here, it's maybe more of a PSA saying, hey, this is there. And there's ways to disable it. Well, and then at that point, for Ubuntu Pro users, those who did get that, the updates were made available and visible in the GUI update manager, so they could update it, through the GUI like any other user. Well, now it appears those Pro packages are being shown to everyone, regardless of if you're subscribed to Pro or not. So if you don't have Pro, the GUI just tells you you need to get Pro for these packages. It shows them, even though you can't get them. So people have started submitting bug reports, essentially saying they're seeing updates that aren't for them in their update manager. And many reports go well beyond that to say, they don't want to see them. They can't disable them. They can't disable them being shown to them. And, they just don't want that there. Why is it in there? So, is this another marketing mishap or just another way to make users aware of the option? Hey, you can get the security update. You just need the Pro. So for those who stay up to date on this stuff, are well aware that Ubuntu Pro is and can easily, people who are aware, you can easily just brush this off as just being a way to make users aware. But for those out of the loop, it's maybe coming off as maybe a little malicious, a little pushy, a little maybe Windows-like. Hey, get Candy Crush kind of thing. So just today, I was on a Linux Facebook page, which I'm on rather often. I get hear some interesting things on there and say some interesting things. And someone posts, it's Facebook. You gotta. That's how it is.
Stir it up
anyway,
a little.
I can't help myself. I have a problem. Anyway, someone posted today, I think it was, or I saw it today. Maybe it was posted previously yesterday, but they posted they're going to go switch to Debian because Ubuntu is holding back updates unless you pay for Pro. So here's the PSA for everybody. A little explanation of some details of Pro, and you guys can add to this and maybe correct me if I miss anything because I have Pro, but I don't pay a whole lot of attention. So maybe I've got something wrong. But here's what it is. So Ubuntu Pro, it's available for free for up to 5 devices of your devices. Most distros and software, they're only supported for a few years by any other distro or even the developers of the software. After that, security bugs, if they're found, the developer won't patch the old software. They patch what's new and currently in the support cycle, but they're not going to patch the old stuff. But with Ubuntu Pro, it provides 10 years of support. This means that, I believe they backport security fixes, at least to critical software in their repos, and then they provide it to those users who are subscribed to Pro. Those users who are using it long after the original developer has stopped maintaining that older version of software. I don't think Ubuntu is holding back any standard software updates. So if him or anyone else say switch to Debian because they feel like they're not getting some updates, you're still not going to get these updates with Debian because they're old versions of the software that they're holding back. Do you guys have anything to add to that, or did I misrepresent something? Do you believe?
No, I think they did just say that they're going to 12 years of support, which is going to match Red Hat. And they do mention in the article that they want to have people sign up for it, for this long-term support, basically so, large enterprises don't just try to get it for free, because it does take a lot of, I do want to say, when you have older programs that you're supporting and still developing new things, there's work involved to make sure everything's backported and patched and working correctly. And, there's some effort and work there. It's not super simple.
Yeah. It's useful if you're going to have to maintain old software for an extended period of time. I'd say most distros, developers, 3-ish, maybe 5 years is fairly common, that to maintain so many different versions years and years and years back. That's just, it's a lot of work. And that's why they want you to pay for it. But heck, they're letting people like us have it for 5 of their devices, and I do have it on one of mine, on some of my, one of my production servers, web servers. I don't know if I really need it, but the terminal banner was nagging me, so I got it. No, it's not one. I don't know how long I'll be. I might maintain that for some time. I had a old 2014, maybe it was 2012 even, server that I had well past its lifespan because of old software, and at that time I didn't have that Pro to keep it going. It was just insecure out there, and it was too much work at the time for me to move away and update, but eventually I did.
You had something, Ken?
Yeah. First, Jeff, you keep rolling to the latest version of Ubuntu, correct?
Yeah.
I believe I believe the users that keep running the most current, whether it's long-term or, just the interim ones, aren't going to see this. It's the ones that are keeping that LTS, maybe because it's supports something, maybe a piece of hardware that they're going to lose access to if they do upgrade to a newer one. And it's those people that are making the complaints the most, because they don't want to see this telling them that they're insecure.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, some of it too is just when you even if you upgrade and you're not losing hardware support, sometimes it's just a pain to go, okay, now I got to reset up my software again, and I got to, and it's just easier to go, well, hey, if I just let it go and just have patches, I don't have to reset everything up again. And, I think there's some of that too, which I understand. I mean, I've got a server that I use for, a Plex server and a music server. And, if I reinstall or really do a big upgrade, sometimes I've got to start over again, and it's not insurmountable, but it's just a little bit of time. I'd rather be doing something else.
Like playing with that new KDE 6, or is it 6.1?
Well, let's not even worry about that. Yeah, let's talk about the Firefox first.
Yeah, and this is okay. So my New Year's prediction this year was how snaps were going to be adopted by a few other non-canonical distributions. And I had a story a couple weeks ago about how Canonical's trying to open up snaps so they were more easily adopted, and even hired a person to help, other distributions, if they wanted to adopt them, they could. Well, this story is going to go kind of against that flow of stories and my prediction. So now you can get a .deb package for Debian and Ubuntu users of Firefox. Now, this means you can, you uninstall your snap package, download the deb file, and run Firefox snap free. Personally, I'm on Kubuntu, and I have commented in the past that, when you first, with Firefox, you first went to start it up, the snap was a little bit slower, and in the article, they talk about that it's a good reason to change from snap to .deb formats. For those that don't know, snap is a container type, and because there's more overhead, they take longer to start up. Well, Canonical said they're working on it, and I have seen improvements, but there's still a slight lag when, versus, when you start it up versus a normal .deb package. Well, I'm on the snap version right now just because it's a default, and I excuse me, there have been other .deb versions of Firefox before, but they were maintained by individuals, and this one's different. Mozilla has introduced a new apt repository that's going to be in sync with Firefox. So this isn't just one person doing this somewhere. This is Mozilla itself is doing this. And so when a new feature or revision is released, the .deb picks it up, and the next update, you get the new version or feature. Basically, it's going to work just like the normal deb packages that you have in your distribution. So it's going to work like a regular repository. Personally, I don't think I'm going to switch, but I leave my browser up all the time, so the initial half a second delay isn't a big deal for me. But if you open and close your browser a lot, or you don't like snaps because of the overhead, or it just bugs you to not have everything in your system in a .deb package, well, I've got the solution for at least Firefox anyway. Now, I'm not going to go through all the steps in detail, as it's copy paste in the article, and in the show notes, you just go to it and you'll be able to follow all the steps and cut and paste. But at a high level, basically, you purge Firefox from your system and make sure everything's gone. And once Firefox gone, now you set up the new repository, and it walks you through getting the keys, and so everything's secure, and gives you the fingerprint so you can really make sure the repository is legit. Now, the next step is one that's a little different, but makes sense if you think about it. They show you how to prioritize the Mozilla repository. So when you say install Firefox, if you don't make the Mozilla repository a priority, it will find Firefox in the normal Debian Ubuntu repository and reinstall the snap package. So then, you just normally, once you have that priority raised on the Mozilla repository, then you just normally install with, sudo apt update and sudo apt install Firefox command. And now you've got Firefox, not in a snap, but in a .deb. Now, I will say too, I don't have problems with snaps or flatpaks or app images. But like I said, if you do, I've given you a way out, at least on Firefox. So let me know on the Discord if you feel strongly one way or the other about snaps. And I know Ken has kind of mentioned he's got some commentary on snaps there, I think, or Rob has also commented.
Yeah, you one of the things you said is you always keep Firefox running, so that extra load time doesn't matter to you. But I don't think I've ever done a benchmark on Firefox, and I'm sure snaps this has even changed. But if you recall, I did a benchmark. I want to say I did Chrome. Maybe I did Firefox. I can't even remember. It was like a year or more ago when I did the benchmark between Snap, Flatpak, and actually that was a couple years ago. I was still on Fedora, but I did the Snaps, Flatpak, and just the native DNF install. And I wasn't even benchmarking the starting up of it. I was benchmarking the web page load times. And I don't remember the results, but actually, let's see. I want to say, if I remember right, Flatpak was actually faster than native, but Snap was quite a bit slower. So it, at least at that time, that's rather old information that I really want to update again on the show one of these times. But at least at that time, it wasn't just startup. But then again, you are probably talking a few seconds because, we're looking at benchmark tools where it's showing the milliseconds of differences between each kind of loading JavaScript and all the various things that the benchmark did. So maybe it's still a couple seconds. But anyway, point is, it may not just be load times that are affected. So it could be affecting you, Jeff.
Well, one thing the Snap does affect is what extensions you may be able to use. One extension I use with Firefox is for accessing my KeePass-based password manager. I had to go with the deb to get to that, so I usually just run the deb on my system.
I suppose the KeePass, I suppose that's in your system, file system, and it probably wasn't getting allowed access to it.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah, the snaps are not only just kind of packaged. My understanding is they're also kind of a secure container to kind of isolate the program in there from the rest of the system for security as well. Now, when I went from native to the .deb to a snap, because that's the way Ubuntu went, I noticed initially starting, clicking start, it probably took a second or maybe 2 seconds to start. But now it's down to, like I said, maybe half a second more. I don't notice it. And I never noticed the difference in loading web pages. I mean, it seemed like they loaded the same speed for me. But I mean, I always find loading pages and stuff, I'm more at the mercy of the serving system rather than like network speed or anything like that. So
that's what Canonical wants you to think.
And I will say I use Bitwarden, and Bitwarden has no problems with the snap on Firefox.
Internet is great these days. It's really the snap that's the problem. Well,
I got my dial-up going. Come on.
Enough about Ubuntu. Enough about Ubuntu, I guess, for now. Or I guess Firefox deb package is really, even though it's very indirectly, we know who we're talking about. Let's talk about another. Is it Debian based or is it Ubuntu based? All the same in the end. But let's talk about another Debian based distro that has some things that Ken would like to say about it.
Well, what he's referring to is OS that I heard about from Marius Nestor. He tells us about the latest update to Endeavor OS. To update it to the latest Linux kernel 6.7, the developers for Endeavor OS refreshed their Galileo ISO with Galileo Neo version 24-01-25. It also includes the necessary fixes and core package updates for both the ISO and the offline KDE Plasma option. If you download the new ISO, you get the new installer, which is powered by Calamares 3.3, which is updated to automatically install the R8168-LTS package when the user selects the Linux kernel LTS option, and to properly unmount a device when an installation error occurs so that it can be used again immediately for another installation session. The devs managed to address several issues in the bash script behind the KDE Plasma offline installation option that caused some problems for users running Wayland sessions, and the KDE Plasma online installation option to fetch the old name packages. For users with machines running the legacy Intel graphics, this update addresses an issue that caused annoying effects and composition in the KDE Plasma Live environment. Quoting Brian Poe, "To avoid misunderstanding, this release doesn't affect running systems. If you regularly have updated your system, the core updates are already there. The fixes described in this announcement are improvements for the ISO and the installation process."
A lot of these distributions, niche, boutique, or whatever you want to call them, that are based on other things like Ubuntu and Debian, they've almost maybe surprised me a little bit. It kind of surprised me. I've always thought of actually in Endeavor OS. You know what? When I said based on Ubuntu or Debian, I was thinking elementary OS this whole time. Endeavor OS is based on Arch. So just ignore all the things I said earlier. But yeah, Endeavor OS is very much Arch-like with a fancy installer. So if you want to run Arch, yeah, and forget what I was going to say about niche boutique distros because I was going on the wrong tangent. But anyway, Endeavor OS, it's pretty much considered to be as close to vanilla Arch as you can get without having to go through the complex install. So if you want to know what Arch feels like to run, but you don't want to struggle with that, the manual setup, and there's an install script even you can use if you want to do that. EndeavourOS is often the one that I hear recommended, and it's what I'd recommend too if you want Arch but not Arch.
If you want Arch without the Arch-based system, without the pain of learning how to install Arch.
Yeah, and that, speaking of my my Linux Facebook groups, that's a common thing that comes up there is people is like, I run EndeavourOS or I run Manjaro. Does that mean I could say I use Arch, by the way? And just to set the record straight, no. You have to go through the work of the manual install to get those the accolades. Then you could say cred. Then you could say I use Arch, by the way, but you're just using an Arch-based distro.
You mean you can say you installed Arch?
That's just not a saying.
I just like the archless Arch. That's a good one.
The archless Arch.
Yeah. There could be a show title in there somewhere.
Archless Arch. There we go.
No Arch, just flat.
But all this talk that we talk about Linux today, every weekend, to our friends all our days off, I have a feeling our time might be coming to an end. You've been loving Linux for years. The world has been loving Linux so much that everyone has been putting Linux kernels into everything from desktop computers to smartphones to smart toasters, speakers, whatever. Well, something better has come along. Huawei has unveiled the new Harmony kernel, or its Harmony OS. And they claim it is 3 times more efficient than the Linux kernel. They have used effective internal components, quote, effective internal components to suit all kinds of devices. The kernel qualifies for 3 security standards, and those are CCEAL6+, ASIL-D, and IEC 61508, making it just super secure. So, this is a big deal for everybody. And especially, with all the sanctions and stuff that have been placed on China, it's definitely a big deal for China, as they'll have something that they can use internally without relying, as they say, on, what do they say, America or United States Linux core? I don't know if I'd say Linux it has anything to do with America. Linus Torvald lives here. He's not even from here. But, it could be a big deal for them. It could be a big deal for the rest of us. But so far, all we have are claims. We have yet to see it. And if it isn't open source, then I'm not really interested anyway. I don't care what kind of performance you get me. Show me the source. And I've heard that the last time when they said they made their own OS, it was just an older version of Android. So, we'll see if anything comes out of this. Could be exciting. Could be nothing. Show me the source code. It's kind of like when Google came out with the Fuchsia, was it? It might be working great in I believe they already have in their smart speakers, might be working great for them, but I don't know, if I can't install on anything, it's like, it's a bunch of nothing to me.
I just wondered if it's the Linux kernel, and then they just go, okay, we're going to strip everything out of it except for the exact hardware we have, and
Exactly. We can make the Linux kernel way more efficient too. I was thinking that too. I mean, back in the old days, that was the reason why I compiled the kernel. I ripped out. I just put exactly what I had, and if it's Huawei who's making the hardware, they could just put exactly the stuff, nothing else. Yeah, that's kind of what I think it is.
Yeah, look how small and fast it is when you cut all this stuff out.
Yeah, I can do that too.
and I'm kind of like you. Until we see source code or something, it's like, yeah, so much of this stuff turns into vaporware.
Yeah, and I don't know. Even if it is great, like Fuchsia, maybe Fuchsia is great. I don't even know because I can't install it. I can't use it. I can't check the source code. So
You're on mute, Ken.
Yeah, no, I just realized. But I got a suspicion that we'll find out it's a BSD derivative.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, until we see something, we won't know. All speculation.
That's very likely. It could be that. They could have taken the Android modified kernel and did that for all we know.
I'm going to bet they went all the way back to CP/M for this one.
All we do know is if it's even as close to as efficient, it's not the Windows kernel.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't try to base anything off of that. Oh, what Microsoft did.
But, that being said, would it ever be as good as KDE 6?
Well, it could be, but who's running 6? I mean, come on, 6.1 is now where it's at. So our friend Nate Graham has released another blog, and of course he talks about KDE and the KDE 6 mega release. I wish I had one of those Ultimate Fighter voice mods there, but so mega release is the 6.0 release on February 28th. So that's when it's coming for sure until we hear different and it doesn't get pushed. Hopefully not. But that's kind of older news though. Cutting edge means running 6.1. Now I kid about that, but work is happening on the 6.1 branch already. And while the polishing continues on 6.0 to get it ready for the first initial release, and it should go without saying at this point, 6.1 isn't something people should be even looking at to use. It's very early, first development stages, so it's not even to alpha stage yet. So why 6.1 already? Well, there's several features that they had to decide for various reasons were, not going to be ready, or they're too big for 6.0 to get in, to get them in. And so they had to push them to 6.1. At some point you kind of have to say, okay, here's what the feature set we're going to have. And then everything else is going to have to go in a later release is basically what happens. Like in Nate's log, he notes a weather widget shows weather alerts for US locations in Plasma 6.1. And there's a system settings drawing tablet page where you can now configure the pen or tablet buttons to act as modifier keys instead of trigger actions. There's several Dolphin fixes along with other features in Ocular and Spectacle, just to name a few. So 6.1 work is going on. And 6.1 is now the master branch, and any code development to the master branch is going to be in 6.1. Unless, of course, something's going to get backported. To go along with the Plasma 6.1 Gear apps, which is the applications part of the Plasma, has been branched as well, and 24.05 is the revision that goes along with 6.1. Frameworks was not mentioned in there, so the KDE is built off Frameworks, Plasma, and the apps, the Gear apps. They didn't mention revision of Framework. Now, just because some stuff is landing in 6.1 doesn't mean there's still not a still huge there still isn't a huge push to squash bugs in 6.0. So Nate even makes a small note that there are a lot of bugs that were squashed which were never released to users, so internal revisions that they fixed. And he says a lot of them would be it'd be a very long list and people would hate to read them, and most people would never encounter them, so he doesn't even go into all those bugs. I won't go through all the bugs squashed that he does list, but just know there's still a majority of work going on the 6.0 release. To summarize the work, there are still 4 very high priority Plasma bugs, up from 3 last week, though he does mention that they're looking deeper because 2 of them might be the same bug. There are 34 15-minute plasma bugs down from 35 last week, and 15-minute bugs are the bugs that a new person to KDE would run into in their first 15 minutes of use. Now, Nate does go on to say that there were 150 bugs fixed over the last week, so a lot of progress is being made. And keep in mind when you hear things like, 34 15-minute bugs down from 1 last week, bugs are getting discovered and reported as well as squashed. So don't just think it's a total static list of bugs. Bugs come and go, and, they show up, they get squashed, they leave, but you might still have the same or near the same total. In his blog this week, Nate even talks about a couple of bugs that were fixed in KDE 5. So there's even a little bit of work on KDE 5 just to squash a few things there. So as you can see, there's a lot of things happening over in KDE land. And if you're wanting to test things out, I have ran Fedora 40 to test out 6.0. They now have KDE 6 in Neon testing. Now, if you remember, I tried to run Unstable and I didn't have any luck, but testing should be a version that people would have more success with. KDE for 6 for me worked pretty well, even though it's still in beta. But, it is beta, so there could be still a few rough edges. They're still working hard to try to really put the polish on it. And there's probably going to be a 6.01 and 6.02 and a couple before we see 6.1. So take a look at Nate's blog in the show notes, and if you're feeling adventurous, give 6.0 a try.
I'm always interested to hear about the advancements and the progress that they're making on KDE, working towards 6, 6.1 and all that. But I did have an experience with KDE. It wasn't 6 yet, but I did try out a new distribution for myself this week. It's been a while since I've actually done that. Maybe something I'll move to. Maybe something I won't. I have an opinion. I tried the KDE version of it too. I have an opinion on that as well, but I'm going to save that for next week.
Oh, nice. We got a teaser or a cliffhanger.
So, Jeff, I don't know why, but one of the things that jumped out from the article was the fact that they were able to reduce the background CPU usage when you're moving the pointer.
Yeah, it's still not smooth yet. It's still beta.
Yeah, I just don't move the pointer.
I just use keyboard shortcuts. That's it.
I'm just in the terminal all day long. What's the pointer?
Oh, then you are definitely using all the core utils, aren't you?
Absolutely. What can you tell me about them?
Well, Michael Littleville actually wrote about the Uutils project getting closer to its 1.0 release. Uutils Core Utils is a cross-platform implementation of the GNU Core Utils in Rust. It aims to be a drop-in replacement for the GNU utils. Differences with GNU are treated as bugs. Their latest release is Rust Core Utils 0.0.24, with 29 more GNU tests passing than in the last release. Now, Sylvester, and I do apologize if I'm saying this wrong, Ledrew posted, each test passed is each test passed is a step forward in ensuring that our users have a reliable and robust set of utilities that align closely with GNU standards. A key highlight of this release is the expansion of support to new platforms and operating systems. Notably, the software has been ported to Spark 64, OpenBSD, and Redux, broadening its usability across different system architectures and environments. I find it interesting to hear the project also contributed to the GNU implementation to improve their test coverage. They are also working to implement Uutils on BusyBox and Toybox according to the README file on GitHub. Have either one of y'all played with some of the Rust versions of the utils?
I have not.
Nope.
Do you foresee this ever taking over the standard or original core utils in Linux?
Linux directly, possibly not, but definitely if they can get it working comprehensively on BusyBox.
There's
they've
probably a good. Go ahead.
In the GitHub, they've got a link showing how well they've progressed on BusyBox.
There's probably a good chance someday there'll be some Linux distros. I don't know if they'd be the mainline ones, but some niche ones out there that will pull that in as their core utils solution. But
you mean the Rusty ones?
Well, I mean, we're definitely probably going to see some ones that really try to go all in on Rust. I mean, there's your niche boutique distro right there. So where's the Learn Linux guy? He can make a new distro. So, is that all we got for news this week?
That I think covers it pretty much.
We're a few minutes early on the news part without Jonathan, but don't leave yet, everybody. We still have our tips. Shall we get started on them?
I'm ready. Let's hear what you got, Rob.
We'll get started. So mine, it's not a command line tip. It is kind of an app pick, maybe a distro pick, you might call it, because I installed the whole thing from an ISO. So this week, I've come on here to show you my libvirt and how I manage it with Copilot and all that stuff. I talked about it often. And one thing that people have often told me in the Discord, other places, is that containers are the way to go. So I kind of went with a distro appliance that's going to let me do both in the system, and that is Proxmox. Now, I've heard of this for years. I don't know why I've never tried it. I guess I was always happy and didn't know what else Proxmox was going to give me. So I'm going to maybe go a little beyond just tip and kind of tell you a little bit about my experience with it also. But, the great thing about Proxmox, so I got a new server. It's really just a micro desktop computer that I bought used, and I set that up side by side. So I actually have both my servers running Proxmox now, servers running Proxmox, and I was easily able to set them up into a cluster. I mean, it's as easy as you go in, you say create cluster, go to the other one, join cluster, boom, you got a cluster, and then you can manage both of them from one interface. Now, what I was talking about when it comes to containers is I didn't realize until fairly recently that Proxmox can do containers. I knew it was VMs. It does the same kind of VMs. It does KVM, QEMU VMs. So it's really similar underneath, but it'll let you manage them. So you can do VMs, but you can do Lexi or LXC containers also. So in the process, when I migrated everything from libvirt over, I did take I started with my Pi-hole, and I made that into a container because it's the easiest one to set up from scratch. Super easy to set up a Pi-hole. And so I made that container, worked great. That was the very first thing I put on my Proxmox while my libvirt D server is coming up. Now, I really probably should did that one last because I did find a weird little issue. And I don't know if it's the fact that I just don't have fantastic hardware or what, but what I did next was I migrated my libvirt one by one, my libvirt virtual machines. And it's pretty easy to do. You just had to file transfer them over. And then there's a command like a QM. I don't remember it now, but you can look it up if you do it. You run a command and it converts that and builds a VM out of it. Now, the weird little glitch I ran into, and I don't know if it just was using up too much resources. I think it was I/O. is when I was converting it, it basically took down my Lexi container. So it took down DNS from my home. I had no DNS. So that's why that should have been the last thing. Fortunately, I was actually home alone. So no one else was on the internet, but otherwise, if they were, I would have heard about it. So it just locked it up, and then when it was done, it just kept on running again. It is weird. And I want to say it was maybe an IO, though I do have, it's a NVMe M.2 NVMe drive, so it should be fast. But the other thing I noticed, why I think it's that, is while I was converting one, I went to transfer another one over, SFTP it over is how I was doing it. And as soon as I did that, my transfer just stalled out like crazy. It stopped, I thought, and then minutes later ticked up a fraction of a percent. I'm like, what's going on here? Well, I guess I don't do that anymore. So Proxmox is awesome for VMs, manage it all. You can do clusters easily. You can do HA, that's high availability pairs. You can migrate your VMs and your containers if you have a cluster from one to another very easily. It took a little bit to figure out, but after I figured it all out, it was all super easy. Just a couple takeaways, and like I said, if you have a different experience, maybe it's just my hardware because it's not high-end server hardware. Just be cautious if you are converting a libvirt VM into a VM on there, because maybe it might take down your containers and really blog some other things down. It did not seem to affect my other virtual machines as I progressed through. And maybe that because that's more dedicated resources to them, whereas the containers is more shared. But in result, Proxmox, awesome. If you want virtual machines, I'd highly recommend it. If you come from an enterprise environment and you're used to vSphere and VMware, which I have used that quite a bit in my day job, Proxmox could be a good free solution. They do have paid support too, though. So definitely a cheaper solution. So I think it'd be a good solution for that. Have either of you tried to use Proxmox before?
No.
I have not, but I was wondering now, is that similar to Docker, or is it more of a full-featured virtual machine compared to a Docker container?
Is Proxmox compared to Docker, or is the Lexi container? Proxmox, it's a full. I installed Proxmox as an ISO on bare metal, and it's full management to manage all your VMs.
Okay.
Firewall, network settings, anything you could think of that you'd manage a VM.
So it's similar to building the VMs under VirtualBox.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I would almost describe it. It sounds like to me it's a operating system designed to just run containers and virtual machines.
Virtual machines and containers. That's what it is. It's a Debian based. I don't remember if I know exactly what it is, but there is a shell, so you can get down to the main thing. Because like I said, I actually had to use command lines to import my libvirt VMs. So it's I don't know. It's unfortunate that's not actually in there. It seems like it should be an easy thing, but if you need to go down into the shell, it's all there.
Does it give you the ability to update those containers all at the same time with one command?
Maybe. I mean, the one thing about containers is you're using the kernel from the host, so you always have the same kernel as the host, but internally you could have a Debian host and Ubuntu, Arch, Fedora, whatever could be in that container, but they're still using the host
The host kernel.
kernel.
Yeah,
But the
David Ruggles
application,
in the Discord says it's a bare metal hypervisor with really nice management functionality.
Yes, or Type 1 hypervisor, as like to call it. I mean, actually, Proxmox itself isn't the hypervisor. The hypervisor is KVM, QEMU, well, and Proxmox, how all that stuff works together. It takes the place of libvirt, but way more complex.
but you had set up each of those containers so they could be accessed as from your point of view as an end user, as a different server, right?
Oh yeah, they're all like different servers. And the other thing I guess I didn't mention is backups. It has backups built into it, so you can schedule backups of all your containers and VMs right into it. I have that set to backup to my NAS. You can mount external storage. You can do it locally. And they even have a more enterprise Proxmox backup appliance too, an ISO that you can install that. Honestly, this one does everything. The built-in does everything I would need. I'm not sure what the appliance does though. Maybe it has like increments.
Then you'll probably love using my command line tool along with Proxmox.
Why don't you tell me what it is?
Well, since I always trying out a variety of applications from a variety of different sources, either through my main repository, sometimes through snaps, flat hubs, even Rust-based applications like the Uutils we talked about earlier. I've always had trouble keeping them all up to date. Well, I came across this command line tool. If you look in the show notes, you'll see it's called Top Grade, because it starts at the top and just goes through, identifies your system's different package managers, whether it be the system package manager, FlatHub, or whatnot. You may even use it to do a firmware upgrades that need to be done. Basically, as I said, it detects all the managers. I wish this week we were able to set up to show, because with one, I was able to set it up so that I've run it from my Linux terminal on my Chromebook and have it SSH into my old Lenovo ThinkDesk, run all applications and do updates under the system, Hackstall, Snap, firmware updates. It says there's on my old ThinkCenter that there's 2 devices with no available firmware updates. Then it goes on to do the flat pack for both user and system packages. And then it even does, you remember when we talked about TLDR? I apparently have something installed on there that it does, where it goes in and does an update and creates the index for it. Then goes to update for Rust Up. And then last thing it did was the cargo. And then once it finished there, it closed the connection to that server and went to my Lenovo ThinkPad and did the same thing. Now, last thing it did was it went through and did it on the Chromebook. There, it tried running the firmware update, and I'm assuming it's because it doesn't have all the rights. It wasn't able to do a firmware update there, so I get a message that particular one failed. But it does give you a summary as it finishes each of the ones, saying what it ran. It showed that I ran, in this case, 2 remotes, the one for my ThinkPad and the other one for my ThinkServer. They both finished okay. Then it shows for the Chromebook itself, the system update finished okay. Config update finished okay. Hackstall, okay. firmware upgrades, as I mentioned earlier, they failed. Blackpack, Rust Up, and Cargo all went okay. So you can configure it so that you can do all those updates on all your systems from one terminal.
You have a lot of package manager type things to update, don't you?
I was
sounds
thinking
pretty
the
cool.
same thing.
It actually surprised me how many I have.
That sounds pretty cool that it can just do all of them for you, kind of get them all done in one shot. Is that only available through GitHub?
That's the easiest way up. It's actually available. Some systems may have it available through your repository, but I would recommend downloading it and installing it through Rust Up or Cargo. That's how I did it on all three systems. That way it downloads it straight from GitHub for all intents and purposes.
Well, that sounds like a nice tool if you have a lot of different package manager types on your system to upgrade, which a lot of us do because we're always trying new things. But Jeff, why don't you finish us off by telling us about your old laptop?
Yes, So I had to wipe an old Windows laptop last Friday because there was malware on it. The kind where you get told to load a program on it and they try and take over your PC. Well, the person shut it down pretty fast, but I didn't know what the malware did, where it all got into. And I didn't want to try Windows recovery because I didn't want Windows to try and fix a few things and call it good. So I took the scorched earth approach and I formatted the disk and I installed Linux. Now this laptop is a 10-plus-year-old HP, and while booting off the USB, things went well and it installed without issue. I thought, oh, this is textbook install. Then I rebooted, and after the install, that's when things went a little sideways. So the first issue I ran into was an ACPI error. Now, ACPI is Advanced Configuration and Power Interface, and it flooded the screen with these errors. I actually had to take a picture of it just so I could read what the errors were because it was going by so fast. And I couldn't get to a command prompt or anything. Well, I did a little research and found that some old hardware had some funky ACPI configurations, and they weren't always standard. So in the grub menu, I added the ACPI equals no, and that was with no spaces and all lowercase. And that told the machine to ignore the power saving features. So it means the laptop, it can no longer go to sleep, but even in Windows, it didn't work so well. It was a little bit hit and miss. So it's not like it ever worked flawlessly anyway. So, Windows had problems with it. Now booting past, I got past that. I'm like, oh, great. Until I hit a no IRQ for Nvidia hardware. Now, a little more searching, I needed to add no APIC, NOAPIC, to my boot line in Grub. APIC, APIC stands for Advanced Programmable Interrupt Controller. So APIC is the replacement for the old PIC chip that in the past was embedded on motherboards and allowed the configuration of interrupts for peripherals like sound cards, IDE controllers, sharing and redirecting of interrupts. Well, disabling APIC removes the ability to make use of IRQ sharing or device IRQ remapping. So I entered that into my grub, and that worked. The old laptop was just having IRQ issues, and disabling it let the system boot up, and it's working. Now very slowly, but it was also very slow under Windows, so I call it a win. So I wanted to pass along these two boot options that you add to Grub, and you put them in on your Linux line, where a lot of times you'll see quiet or splash, or you just edit it in there, and hopefully these little two options will help get old hardware going, and maybe you have some that you haven't been able to get going, and this might allow you to get them working under Linux. So let me know if it helped anybody revive some old hardware in the Discord.
I heard you say old or IRQ issues. How old is this again? It's like from 99 or what?
It's at least 10 years old. Yeah, I kind of was like, no IRQ for Nvidia. What?
It's not a thing. I mean, obviously it's still in there, but I haven't had to deal with actual anything with IRQ for a long time. Ken, sorry
It just took me a minute to try to remember if the old Dell I've got sitting in the laptop's a 286 or 386.
Well, it is an old HP, and when I was doing some research, I found out that a lot of people had problems with some of the old HP hardware. It was kind of non-standard, or they had a couple little non-standard twists in there, and it caused issues. And so that was also one of the issues. They said you can get IRQ issues.
Are you talking
but I was
about,
like you, I hadn't. Go ahead, Ken.
Are you talking about when it was first brought out, or when they tried going to Linux, or putting in new Windows?
If you try to go to Linux, basically they had some custom drivers for Windows they had to add in to support that non-standard hardware. Well, when you go to Linux, it doesn't have the custom driver to handle some of this weird, funky hardware. So then you just turn off the power controller, you turn off the automated IRQ stuff, and then it handles everything okay.
All right. Great advice for people trying to get old hardware going. Another thing I often hear people say is to use something like MX Linux or Mint. Which reminds me, you know what? I'll do that. I'll skip on that. But so anyway, that is all the news and tips we have for the week. So, Ken, do you want to send us off with what you have to plug this week?
Yes. This week I found a great walk down through history. I've got the link in the show notes where Stephen Von Nichols gives us a brief history of Unix and how it led into Linux. If you do read it, drop your thoughts in our open discussion thread. Oh, and I do want to remind everybody, or let everybody know, Make MKV version 1.17.6 is now available.
All right, Jeff, what do you got?
All right. Well, two things here. I did want to mention a little story out there. It wasn't enough to make it a true story, but Ubuntu 24.04 LTS is going to try to ship with the 6.8 kernel. So they want to make it the kernel kind of more cutting edge for this LTS because of all the hardware and advances in this kernel. So definitely check that out. We'll see how that pans out. And if you want to catch me someplace other than here, check out the latest Floss Weekly. Jonathan and I did a show together this Wednesday, and you can catch me there. And other than that, I hope everyone has a great Linux week.
Excellent. So when I was talking about my Proxmox story, I also wanted to plug Learn Linux TV. I know that person, he was a listener at least at one point, maybe still is, but he has a lot of great videos on Proxmox. There were a few that I used just to get myself going to see if I was going to be interested in it. And if I have any troubles, I'll probably go back and look at some of those because he has a lot of Proxmox videos. So, and other than that, you can't catch me in Floss, not yet, maybe someday in the future, I don't know. But you can catch me at robertpcampbell.com. I'll put that in the show notes. And on there, you can find links to my LinkedIn, my Mastodon, and if you want to donate a coffee for me for all the hard work I do for you guys, you can go and you can click the little coffee cup and donate. And that is all we have for the week. Hope everyone has a good one, and we'll see you all here again next week on the Untitled Linux Show.